Pendulums. Groups of people thinking in the same direction create energy information structures. Pendulums. These structures begin to develop independently and subordinate people to their own laws. People do not realize that they involuntarily act in the interests of the pendulum. How to wake up from viscous obsession. Destructive pendulums. Since childhood, we have been taught to obey someone else's will, perform duties, serve the fatherland, family, political party, firm, state, idea, anyone but ourselves, only in the last place. Everyone has a sense of duty, responsibility, necessity, guilt to one degree or another. Each person in one way or another stays in the service in various groups and organizations, family, club, educational institution, enterprise, political party, state, and so on. All these structures are born and develop when a separate group of people begins to think and act in the same direction. Then new people join, and the structure grows, gains strength, forces its members to follow the established rules, and eventually can subjugate large segments of society. At the level of material implementation, the structure consists of people united by common goals and material items such as buildings, structures, furniture, equipment, machinery, and so on. But what is behind all this at the energy level? Structure occurs when the thoughts of a group of people are directed in one direction, and therefore, the parameters of mental energy are identical. The mental energy of individuals is combined into a single stream. In this case, a separate, independent energy information structure is created in the middle of the energy ocean, an energy pendulum. This structure begins to live its own life and subordinates the people involved in its creation to its laws. Why a pendulum? Because it sways the more people, followers, feed it with their energy. Each pendulum has its own characteristic oscillation frequency. For example, a swing can be rocked only by making efforts with a certain frequency. This frequency is called resonant. If the number of adherents of the pendulum decreases, its oscillations fade away. When there are no followers left at all, the pendulum will stop and die as an entity. Here are some examples of extinct pendulums. Ancient pagan religions, stone tools, ancient weapons, old-fashioned trends, vinyl records. In other words, everything that was before and is not used now. You're probably surprised. Are these all pendulums? Yes, any structures with their attributes created by the mental energy of people are pendulums. In general, any living beings capable of radiating energy in one direction sooner or later create energy pendulums. Here are examples of pendulums in wildlife: colonies of bacteria, populations of living creatures, schools of fish, herds of animals, forests, prairies, anthills, any more or less orderly and homogeneous structures of living organisms. Each individual living organism is an elementary pendulum in itself, as it is an energy unit. When a group of such single pendulums begins to oscillate in unison, a group pendulum is created. It stands above its adherents as a superstructure, exists as a separate, independent structure, and sets rules for its adherents to keep them together and get new ones. Such a structure is independent in the sense that it develops independently, according to its own laws. Adherents do not realize that they act according to the laws of the pendulum, and not according to their own arbitrariness. For example, the bureaucratic apparatus develops as an independent structure, regardless of the will of individual officials. Of course, an influential official can make independent decisions, but these decisions cannot go against the laws of the system. Otherwise, such an adherent will be rejected. Even a person in the singular, who is a pendulum, is not always aware of his motivations. For example, an energy vampire. Any pendulum is destructive by nature, as it takes away energy from its followers and establishes its power over them. The destructiveness of the pendulum is manifested in the fact that it does not care about the fate of each individual adherent. The pendulum has only one goal: to receive the energy of the adherent, and it will benefit the adherent himself or not. It does not matter. A person under the influence of the system is forced to build his life in accordance with its laws. Otherwise, it will chew it and spit it out. Being under the influence of a destructive pendulum, you can easily break your whole life It is usually difficult to escape without losses. If a person is lucky, he finds his place in the system and feels like a fish in water. He, being an adherent, gives energy to the pendulum, and it provides it with an environment for existence. As soon as the adherent begins to violate the laws of structure, the frequency of his radiation no longer coincides with the resonance frequency of oscillations of the pendulum. Without getting energy, he throws out or destroys a wayward adherent. If a person is carried far from favorable lines for him, then life in the structure of someone else's pendulum turns into hard labor or just a dreary existence. Such a pendulum becomes purely destructive for the adherent. A person under his influence loses his freedom. He is forced to live according to imposed laws and be a cog in a big mechanism, whether he likes it or not. A person can fall under the patronage of a pendulum and achieve outstanding results. Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, and the like are all favorites of destructive pendulums. But in any case, this pendulum does not care about the well-being of its followers at all, but only uses them for its own purposes. When Napoleon was asked if he was ever really happy, he counted only a few days of his life. The pendulum uses sophisticated methods to attract new followers, who fly like moths to the light. How often people, seduced by the advertising tricks of the pendulum, go far away from the happiness that was very close. They go to the army and die. They enter an educational institution and master the wrong profession in vain. They find someone else's, but supposedly prestigious job and drown in a swamp of problems. They associate their lives with a stranger and then suffer. The activity of the pendulum very often leads to the destruction of the fate of followers. Although it tries to hide its motives with all kinds of virtuous masks, the main danger for a person who has been influenced by a destructive pendulum is that he takes his victim away from those lines of life where a person can find his happiness. Let's note its distinctive features. The pendulum feeds on the energy of its followers and thereby increases its oscillations. The pendulum seeks to attract as many supporters as possible in order to get as much energy as possible. The pendulum opposes a group of its adherents to all other groups. We are like that, and they are different, bad. The pendulum aggressively accuses anyone who did not want to become a follower, and tries to either attract to its side, neutralize, or eliminate. The pendulum uses benevolent attractive masks, hides behind high goals, plays on people's feelings to justify its actions and win as many adherents as possible. The pendulum is essentially an egregor, but it doesn't say everything. The concept of egregor does not reflect the whole complex of nuances of human interaction with energy information entities. Pendulums play an immeasurably greater role in human life than is commonly believed. The way the pendulum absorbs the energy of its followers can be clearly illustrated by the following example. Imagine a full stadium. There is an intense football match. Passions are heated. Fans are raging. Here is one player who makes an unforgivable oversight that leads to the defeat of the team. The player is hit by a storm of indignation of the fans. They are ready to tear him apart. Can you imagine what a mass of negative energy falls on the unfortunate's head? He should have just died on the spot from such a monstrous blow. But this does not happen. He is alive and well, although depressed by his guilt. Where did the negative energy directed at the player go? She was taken away by a pendulum. If it were not so, then the object of hatred of the crowd would die, and the idol would just fly into the air. I don't undertake to judge whether the pendulum is an animate entity or it's just an energy form. Yes, it doesn't matter for the transurfing technique. The main thing is to recognize the pendulum and not accept its play without benefit for yourself. It is very easy to recognize a destructive pendulum by one distinctive feature. He always competes with his own kind in the fight for people. The goal of the pendulum is only one: to capture as many followers as possible in order to get as much energy as possible. The more aggressive the pendulum acts in the struggle for adherence, the more destructive it is. That is, it poses a danger to the fate of an individual. It can be argued that there are charitable organizations, nature conservation societies, animals, and others. What's destructive about them? For you personally, it is that they, no matter how you look at it, feed on your energy and they do not care. about other people's happiness and well-being. They call to be merciful to others, remaining indifferent to you. If it suits you and you really feel happy doing such work, then it can be considered a vocation, and you have found your pendulum. But here you have to be honest with yourself. Don't you wear a benefactor's mask? Do you really sincerely give your energy and money for the benefit of others, or play charity to seem better? Destructive pendulums have taught people to choose their own destiny. After all, if a person is free in his choice, he will gain independence. Then the pendulums can't attract him to their followers. Our consciousness is so used to the fact that fate is a lot, and it is really very difficult for us to believe in the possibility of simply choosing the fate that we like best. It is profitable for pendulums to keep followers under control, so they invent all kinds of ways to manipulate their servants. From the further presentation, it will become clear to you how they do it. Transurfing can also become a pendulum if you make it a cult, movement, or school. Different pendulums, of course, are destructive to varying degrees. Transurfing, even in the worst case, will be the least destructive because it serves not some common extraneous purpose, but exclusively for the benefit of each individual. Therefore, such a pendulum would be very unusual, a kind of community of individualists engaged exclusively in their own fate. By the way, here's your homework. Which pendulums can be called constructive? But why am I even telling you about it? Then to explain what it means to choose your destiny and how to do it. Be patient, dear reader. Everything is not so simple, but gradually the picture will begin to clear up. Battle of pendulums. The main distinguishing feature of a destructive pendulum is that it aggressively seeks to destroy other pendulums in order to pull people to its side. To do this, he constantly incites his followers against strangers. We are like that, and they are different, bad. People involved in this struggle get lost and go to false goals, which they mistakenly perceive as their own. This shows the destructiveness of the pendulums. The struggle against other people's followers is fruitless and leads to the destruction of lives, both their own and those of others. Let's take the extreme manifestation of the battle for adherence, the war. To convince its adherents to go to war, the pendulum gives arguments corresponding to a specific historical era. The most primitive method that was used before is simply to order to take away from others what belongs to them. As society became more civilized, the arguments acquired a more refined form. One nation is declared the highest, and others a defective. The good goal is to raise these underdeveloped peoples to the highest level, and if they resist, to use force. Well, modern concepts of war look something like this. There is a bee's nest hanging on a tree in the forest. Wild bees live there, get their own honey, and raise their children. But a pendulum approaches the nest and announces to its followers, these are wild bees. They are very dangerous, so they must be destroyed or, at least, ruin the nest. Don't believe me? Look. Then he starts stirring this nest with a stick. Bees fly out and start stinging their followers. And the pendulum triumphs. You see how aggressive they are. We need to destroy them. Whatever justifying slogans wars and revolutions are covered with, their essence is one. It's a battle of pendulums for their followers. The forms of battle may be different, but the only goal is to win as many supporters as possible. New forces are the vital necessity of the pendulum. Without them, it will stop. So the battle of pendulums is a natural and inevitable struggle for existence. After wars and revolutions, there are less aggressive, but rather tough forms of battle. For example, the struggle for markets, rivalry of political parties, competition in the economy, all kinds of marketing, advertising campaigns, ideological propaganda, and so on. The environment of human existence is built on pendulums, so all spheres of activity are covered by competition. Rivalry takes place at all levels, from state disputes to competition between club teams and individuals. The new, unusual, incomprehensible always makes its way with difficulty. Why would that be? Is it really just the inertia of thinking? The main reason is that it is unprofitable for old pendulums to appear a beginner who will pull supporters to his side. For example, internal combustion engines, which so heavily clog the atmosphere of cities, could have long been a thing of the past. After all, many alternative, environmentally friendly engine models have been developed. However, This threatens the death of the pendulums of all corporations. And they are still very strong, so they will not allow some inventors to remove themselves from the scene so easily. It comes to the point that these monsters literally buy up patents for models of new engines and keep them secret, while announcing the low efficiency of inventions. Implementing their structure at the material level, pendulums strengthen their position with financial resources, structures, equipment and, of course, human resources. The favorites of the pendulums are put at the head of human pyramids. Favorites are leaders of all ranks, from small bosses to presidents of states. They do not necessarily have to have particularly outstanding qualities. As a rule, they become adherents, whose parameters most optimally fit into the structure of the pendulum. It may seem to the favorite that he has achieved impressive results in his life, solely due to his personal merits. To some extent, this is true. But most of the work on the nomination of your pets is done by the self-organizing structure of the pendulum. If the favorite settings no longer meet the system requirements, it is ruthlessly eliminated. The battle of pendulums is destructive for their adherents in that it seems to the latter that they, fulfilling the highest will, act according to their personal conviction. The personal conviction of the adherents is in most cases captured by pendulums. As soon as a person has tuned into his frequency, there is an interaction between him and the pendulum at the energy level. The frequency of radiation of the mental energy of the adherent is fixed and maintained by the energy of the pendulum. There is a kind of capture, a loop with feedback. The adherent radiates at the resonant frequency of the pendulum, and he, in turn, also feeds a little with the energy of the adherent in order to maintain influence. At the level of material realization, we observe such an interaction in the form of a familiar picture. For example, the pendulum of a political party conducts agitation, hooks a supporter, and gives him some energy supply in the form of a sense of rightness, satisfaction, dignity, significance. It seems to the adherent that he has control over the situation. He can choose. In fact, it was he who was chosen and established control over him. Outwardly, it looks like an adherent's conviction that he is implementing his will. However, this will is artificially and imperceptibly imposed on him by a pendulum. The adherent gets into his information field, communicates with his own kind on hot topics, enters into an energy connection, and thus fixes his frequency. Then the expectations of the adherent can be deceived. Thoughts against the former idol appear, and the radiation frequency falls out of the capture loop. The capture force varies depending on the degree of power of the pendulum. In some cases, the adherent is allowed to simply leave, and in others, such a heretic can be deprived of freedom or life. Frequency capture can be illustrated with such a clear example. You're humming some kind of melody to yourself, but at that moment you heard other loud music. Now, when you hear a different melody, it will be very difficult for you to continue to play the old motive to yourself. For the purposes of transurfing, it does not matter how the interaction between the pendulum and the adherent takes place at the energy level. We will explore this interaction using a simplified model in everyday view. That's enough. No one can explain in detail what and how is really happening, because then the question will arise, what is meant by actually? And so on, in accordance with the infinity of the process of cognition. It's a thankless activity, so you'll have to be content with little. We should be happy that we are still able to understand something. Let's see how the pendulums manipulate their followers. Marionette threads. Let's ask ourselves, how can pendulums force their followers to voluntarily give energy? Big and powerful, for example, can make his followers act according to certain rules. But how do weak pendulums do it? When a person does not have the power to forcibly force another to do something, he uses reasonable arguments, persuasion, promises. All these are weak methods inherent exclusively in human society, which has distanced from natural forces. Pendulums also sometimes use such methods, but they also have much more powerful weapons. They are energy information entities, so they obey and act in accordance with the powerful and immutable laws of existence of this world. A person gives energy to the pendulum when he radiates mental energy at its resonant frequency. To do this, it is not necessary for a person to consciously direct his thoughts in favor of the pendulum. As you understand, most of people's thoughts and actions lie in the field of the unconscious. This property of the human psyche is used by pendulums. They manage to get energy not only from their followers, but also from ardent opponents. You're probably already guessing how. Imagine a group of old ladies on the bench who swear what the country's government is on. They are not supporters of the government's pendulum. They hate it for a number of reasons. However, what's going on? Old women scold the government. How mediocre, corrupt, cynical, and stupid it is. Thus, they intensely radiate mental energy at the frequency of this pendulum. In fact, the pendulum doesn't care which way you'll swing it from. Both positive and negative energy are suitable for him. The main thing is that the radiation frequency is resonant. So, the main task of the pendulum is to touch a person by the living, no matter how, just to occupy his thoughts. With the advent of the media, the methods of pendulums are becoming more and more sophisticated. A person gets into a strong addiction. Have you noticed that bad news usually prevails in information programs? They cause strong emotions, anxiety, fear, indignation, anger, hatred. The task of the correspondents is to attract attention. The media, themselves being pendulums, are at the service of more powerful pendulums. The declared goal is free access to any information. The actual goal is tuning the necessary frequencies in every possible way. One of the most favored ways of the pendulum to access your energy is to bring you out of balance. Having deviated from the balance, you begin to sway at the frequency of the pendulum and thereby swing it. Let's say prices have risen. You react negatively. You start to be indignant, complain, exchange information with acquaintances. Quite a normal and adequate reaction. But this is exactly what the pendulum is waiting for. You radiate negative energy into the surrounding world at the frequency of the pendulum. It receives energy and swings even more. The situation worsens. The strongest thread by which the pendulum can pull you is fear. The oldest and strongest feeling. It doesn't matter what you're afraid of, but if fear is related to some aspect of the pendulum, it will get your energy. Anxiety and anxiety are already weaker, but the threads are still strong enough. These feelings very well fix the radiation of mental energy at the frequency of the pendulum. If something bothers you, it's hard for you to concentrate on something else. Guilt is also one of the widest channels through which the pendulum pumps energy out of you. It has been imposed on us since childhood. This is a very convenient method of manipulation. If you are guilty, you must do what I say. It's very uncomfortable to live with a sense of guilt, so they try to get rid of it. But in what way? To be punished or to work off guilt. Both imply submission, obedience, and work of thoughts in a certain direction. A sense of duty is a special case of guilt. Must means must do something, must do it. As a result, the guilty, both true and far-fetched, rave with their heads down and carry their pendulum in the form of energy. Instilled guilt is a favored weapon of manipulators, and we will come back to it later. All kinds of psychological complexes of people should be especially noted. Inferiority complex: I have an unattractive appearance. I have no abilities and talents. I lack intelligence or wit. I do not know how to communicate with people. I am not worthy. Guilt complex: I'm guilty of something. Everyone condemns me. I have to carry my cross. The warrior's complex: I must be cool. I declare war on myself and everyone around me. I will fight for a place under the sun. I will take my own by force. Truth-loving complex: I will prove myself right at all costs and prove to others that they are wrong. These and other complexes are personal keys to the energy of individuals. The pendulum, touching a person by the living, intensively pumps out energy from him. You yourself can continue the list of threads for which the pendulums pull their puppets: justice, pride, vanity, honor, love, hatred, greed, generosity, curiosity, interest, hunger, and other feelings and needs. Feelings and interest allow you to fix the flow of thoughts in a certain direction. If the topic causes neither interest nor emotions, then it is very difficult to focus on it. Therefore, pendulums capture the flow of thoughts, touching the feelings and needs of a person. As a rule, people react to negative external stimuli as standard. Negative news causes discontent. Disturbing news, a reaction of anxiety or fear. Resentment causes dislike, and so on. Habits serve as a starting lever for starting the gripper mechanism. For example, the habit of being irritated or worried for insignificant reasons, responding to a provocation, in general, responding with a negative reaction to a negative irritant. A person may be aware that negative thoughts and actions do not bring anything good, but as he is usual to make old mistakes. Thus, habits often create problems and make them act ineffectively, and it is difficult to get rid of them. They are an illusion of comfort. A person trusts more what has been familiar for a long time. Everything new causes concern. The old, familiar has already proven itself on experience. It's like an old chair where you sit down to rest after work. Maybe new is more comfortable, but the old one is more comfortable. Comfort is characterized by such concepts as convenience, trust, positive experience, predictability. The new has these qualities to a much lesser extent, so it takes a lot of time for a new habit to become an old one. So, in general terms, we have considered the methods of influence of beacons on people. Can a person get rid of the influence of the pendulum? We will talk about the ways of liberation further. However, it often happens that someone rebels and openly opposes the pendulum that enslaved him. In such a duel, a person is always defeated. A pendulum can only be defeated by another pendulum. One person can't do anything. If he came out of obedience and entered the fight, he would only lose energy and at best would be thrown out of the system, and at worst crushed. An adherent who dares to violate the rules established by the pendulum is outlawed. Outwardly, it manifests itself as a condemnation for an act. In fact, the fault lies not in the act itself, but in the fact that the adherent came out of obedience. That is, he stopped supplying the pendulum with energy. Why doesn't the sword cut the wrong head? Because a person who has accepted a sense of guilt is fully ready to submit to the power of the pendulum. For a pendulum, the adherent's remorse for the committed act does not matter. Only the restoration of lost control matters. The pendulum will immediately become kinder if you give it the opportunity to manipulate you. Well, if the culprit does not submit, then he can be eliminated, because there is nothing else to take from him. The true motives of the pendulum are usually veiled by moral principles. They say that the one who repented of what he did is no longer such a villain. You yourself can easily distinguish where the moral principle operates and where the interests of the system are affected. If you always remember what pendulums are and what their true goals are, you get what you don't want. As mentioned and above, pendulums can receive energy from both their followers and opponents, but the loss of energy is half the trouble. If the pendulum is sufficiently destructive, the damage is caused to the well-being and fate of the person. Everyone encounters negative information or undesirable events from time to time. All these are provocations of pendulums. A person does not want it to be in his life, but always reacts in one of two options. If the information does not hurt him very much, he ignores it and quickly forgets. If provocative information annoys or frightens, that is, it falls into the soul, then mental energy is captured in the loop of the pendulum, and the person adjusts to the resonant frequency. Then the events develop according to the scenario, you know. A person is angry, indignant, worried, afraid, violently expresses discontent, in general, actively radiates energy at the frequency of a destructive pendulum. This energy goes not only to the pendulum. The parameters of mental energy are such that a person is transferred to the line of life, where what he wants to avoid is in excess. As you remember, if the radiation of a person's mental energy is fixed at a certain frequency, it is transferred to the appropriate lines of life. The destructive role of the pendulum here is to fix the frequency using the capture loop. Let's say you miss information about disasters and natural disasters. After all, if it doesn't affect you, why unnecessary disorders? In this case, as a rule, a disaster occurs somewhere. But personally, you are on the line of life, where you are not a victim, but an observer. The line where you are the victim was left aside. Conversely, if you let in information about disasters and misfortunes, talk and discuss it with friends, it is quite possible that you will soon move to the line where you yourself will be a victim. It turns out that the stronger your desire to avoid something, the more likely you are to get it. To actively fight what you don't want, it means to make every effort to make it happen in your life. It is not even necessary to take any action to move to unwanted lines of life. Negative thoughts, full of emotions, are quite enough. You don't want bad weather, and think about how much you don't like rain. Noisy neighbors are bothered, and you constantly quarrel with them or quietly hate them. You are afraid of something, and it worries you a lot. Tired of the current job, and you enjoy your dislike for it. You are haunted everywhere by what you actively do not want. That is, you are afraid, hate, despise. On the other hand, there are many things that I would also like to avoid, but you don't really care about it at the moment. In this case, it doesn't happen. But as soon as you let the unwanted into yourself, become imbued with dislike and begin to cherish this feeling, the unwanted will necessarily materialize in your life. The only way to eliminate the undesirable from your life is to free yourself from the influence of the pendulum that captured your mental energy. And from now on, do not succumb to his provocations and do not join this game. There are two ways to get out of the influence of a destructive pendulum: fail it or extinguish it. Let's take a closer look at how this is done. Pendulum failure. It's useless to fight the pendulum. As already mentioned above, fighting him means giving him your energy. The first and most important condition for success is to refuse to fight it. First of all, the more actively you fight off the pendulums that annoy you, the more actively they will plant. You can repeat endlessly, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, everyone." It seems to you that you are fighting them off, but in fact you feed the pendulums with your energy, and they stick even more. Secondly, you have no right to condemn and change anything in this world. You need to accept everything as paintings at the exhibition, whether you like them or not. Many paintings that will seem unattractive can be presented at the exhibition. However, it does not occur to you to demand that they be removed from there. After you have recognized the right of the pendulum to exist, you have the right to leave it, not to be influenced. But the main thing is not to fight him, not to judge him, not to be angry, because all this will mean your participation in his game. On the contrary, we must calmly take it for granted as an inevitable evil and then leave. Showing rejection in any form, you give the energy of the pendulum. Before you figure out what it means to choose, you should learn to refuse. People tend to have a vague idea of what they want, but everyone knows exactly what they don't want. In an effort to get rid of undesirable things or events, many people do the opposite. To refuse, you must accept. The word accept here means not to let into yourself, but to recognize the right to exist and indifferently pass by. To accept and let go means to pass through yourself and wave goodbye with a pen. On the contrary, to accept and leave means to let into yourself, and then to get attached or resist. If you are bothered by thoughts of what you don't like, it will be in your life. Imagine that one person doesn't like apples. He just hates them. They make him sick. A person could simply not pay attention to them, but he is not satisfied with the fact that in the world in which he lives, there is such a nasty thing as apples. They annoy him every time, just catching his eye, and he actively expresses his disgust. It's on a material level. However, at the energy level, a person greedily pounces on apples, stuffs his mouth, snwa loudly and screams that he hates them, fills his pockets, chokes and complains again how he is tired of them. It doesn't occur to a person that you can just throw apples out of your life if he doesn't want them. Whether you love something or hate it doesn't matter. The main thing is that if your thoughts are fixated on the subject of your feelings, the energy of thoughts is fixed at a certain frequency. So you are captured by a pendulum and transferred to the corresponding lines of life, where the object of fixation is present in abundance. If you don't want to have something, just don't think about it, pass by indifferently, and it will disappear from your life. To throw it out of life means not to avoid, but to ignore. To avoid is to allow into your life, but actively try to get rid of it. To ignore means not to react in any way and, therefore, not to have. Imagine that you are a radio receiver. Every day you wake up and listen to the radio station. You hate the world that surrounds you, so switch to a different frequency. It may seem that by installing an iron curtain between yourself and the world, you will protect yourself from unwanted pendulums. It's nothing more than an illusion. Being in an iron shell, you say to yourself, "I'm a blank wall. I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. I don't know anything. I won't tell anyone anything. I have no access." To maintain such a protective field, it is necessary to spend energy, and a lot of energy. A person who is deliberately trying to fence himself off from the world is constantly in tension. In addition, the energy of the protective field is tuned to the frequency of the pendulum against which the protection is directed. And that's exactly what the pendulum needs. He doesn't care how you give energy, with or without desire. What then is the protection against the pendulum? Emptiness. If I'm empty, there's nothing to hook me. I don't get into the game of the pendulum, but I don't try to defend myself from it. I just ignore him. The energy of the pendulum flies through without touching me and dissipates in space. The pendulum game doesn't bother me. It doesn't touch me. I'm empty about him. The main task of the pendulum is to attract as many adherents as possible and get energy from them. If you ignore the pendulum, it will leave you alone and switch to others, because it acts only on those who accept its game. That is, it begins to radiate on its frequency. The rudest example. A barking dog got behind you. If you turn around, it's even louder. If you take her seriously and start arguing with her, she will run after her for a long time, because her goal is to find someone to scandalize with. But if you ignored it, it will switch to another object. And notice, it won't even occur to her to be offended by the fact that you didn't pay attention to her. She is too absorbed in her goal of getting energy to think about something else. Instead of a dog, there may be a quarrelsome person. This model will work exactly the same way. If someone bothers you, try on a model of a destructive pendulum on him. It will surely suit him. If you can't pay off the rival, then just don't respond to provocations and ignore them. He won't leave you until you stop giving him your energy. You can give energy both directly, entering into an adverse with him, and indirectly, silently hating. To stop giving energy means not to think about it at all, to throw it out of your head. Just tell yourself, yes, the dog is with him, and he will leave your life. However, it often happens that it is not possible to simply ignore the pendulum. For example, the boss calls you to the carpet. Just denial or protection will mean a loss of energy, since both are a fight against the pendulum. In such cases, you can pretend that you are entering the pendulum game. The main thing is that you realize that you are entering the game on-site. Imagine how a huge kid swings a sledgehammer at you and strikes with all his might. You have nothing against it, you don't defend yourself, and you don't attack. At this moment, you just calmly step aside, and the child flies into the void together with the sledgehammer. This means that the pendulum can't catch you and fails. This principle is the basis of the Aikido struggle. The following literally happens there. The attacker is taken under the handle. Go with him, as if to see him off, and then easily released and sent to fly in the direction where his energy was directed. The whole secret is that the defender has nothing against the attack. He agrees with the attacker's line, goes with him for a while, and then lets him go. The attacker's energy falls into the void, because if the defender is empty, then there is nothing to catch him for. The technique of such soft care is that at the first attack of the pendulum, you respond with consent, and then diplomatically retreat, or unobtrusively direct the movement in the direction you need. For example, an excited boss wants to take a job on you and vigorously demands that it be done exactly as he thinks. You know that it should be done differently, or you don't consider it your duty at all. If you start to object, argue, defend yourself, he will strictly demand obedience. After all, he made a decision, and you are going against him. Do the opposite. Listen carefully, agree with everything, let the first impulse dry up, and then calmly start discussing the details of the work with him. At the moment, you have received the energy of the boss and radiate at his frequency. His impulse, without meeting resistance, will get stuck for a while. Don't tell him that you know better how to do this job. Don't refuse and don't argue. Just consult with your boss about how you could do it faster and better, or maybe another performer will do it better. You swing together with the pendulum, but you do it consciously, not participating in the game, but as if watching from the outside. He swings, completely immersed in the game. This is his game. He makes a decision, and they agree and consult with him. You will see that the energy previously directed at you will go to the side, towards another decision or another performer. Thus, the pendulum will fail for you personally. Pendulum cancellation. There are cases when the pendulum cannot fail. That is, you can't ignore it or get away from it. I had a friend, so compliant, good-natured, but at the same time endowed with incredible physical strength. We're going with him late in the evening on the tram. And there's a company of aggressive bags, a real destructive pendulum. There are a lot of them. At the same time, they feed each other with their negative energy and feel complete impunity. To multiply the energy of such a company, as a rule, it is required to constantly bully someone in order to get refuge from the outside. They began to harass my friend because the good-natured and peaceful expression of his face did not inspire any danger. They tried to undermine him with mockery and insults, but he sat silently and did not respond to provocations. That is, he tried to fail the pendulum. I didn't interfere either, because I knew that nothing threatened him. But the company was taking a big risk. Finally, unable to stand it, my friend went to the exit, but the most impudent adherent blocked his way. Then my friend, cornered, grabbed the asshole by the neck and struck a monstrous blow. The victim's face immediately turned into porridge. The other heroes were stunned by surprise and horror. The mate turned and grabbed the next one, but he muttered in a trembling voice, "All, man, all ... no EET." The energy of the pendulum was instantly extinguished, and the followers, shuffling and shuffling, fell out of the tram. Of course, it's good for those who can stand up for themselves. And if not, what then? If there is really nowhere to retreat, you can throw something extraordinary to extinguish the pendulum. Something that no one expects from you. I was told such a case. One guy was cornered by a pack of brave followers of the street gang and was going to beat him. Then he approached the leader, stared at him with a crazy look, and said, "What do you have to break, your nose or your jaw?" This formulation of the question clearly did not line into the script, and the leader was stunned for a moment. Then the guy exclaimed with unhealthy enthusiasm, "Let me tear off your ear." And the whole five clung to his ear. He yawned a lot. The whole performance that the gang used to acting out was disrupted. The leader no longer had the thought of beating someone. He was tormented by one concern, to free his ear. The guy was left alone as a psycho, but he escaped the massacre. So, if you are in a situation where the standard scenario of events is known, do something, no matter what, that does not fit into this scenario. The pendulum will be extinguished. The fact is that, while you are acting according to the script, you accept the pendulum game and give your energy at this frequency. But if your frequency is very different, you get into dissonance with the pendulum and thus knock it out of rhythm. At the same time, you should not climb on the horn. If you are dealing with a pendulum that has nothing to lose, if you were attacked for the purpose of robbery, it is better to give the money right away. Some even carry $12 in cash specifically for such cases. For example, if a robber is a drug addict or a psycho, he can easily take your life, even if you are a martial artist. Therefore, he should not be involved, as well as a mad dog. Otherwise, your death will be unjustified and ridiculous. A sense of humor and imagination can help in extinguishing. Turn your irritation into the game. For example, you are bothered by crowds of people on the street or in transport who are in a hurry somewhere and prevent you from moving forward. Imagine that you are in Antarctica at the bird market. People are penguins. They are very funny, fussing, and fusing. And who are you? Also a penguin. After such a transformation, people already inspire sympathy and curiosity rather than irritation. Of course, it's hard to control yourself when you literally want to tear and throw. At such moments, it is most difficult to remember that it is just a pendulum that seeks to extract energy from you. Don't give in to his provocations. The pendulum, like a vampire, uses a kind of anesthesia, your habit to react negatively to the irritant. Even now, after reading these lines, you can get distracted in a few minutes and answer an unwanted phone call irritably. But if you set yourself the goal of acquiring the habit of remembering, you will eventually become immune to the provocation of pendulums. Pay attention when you come across some unfortunate circumstance and reacted with irritation, discontent, negative emotions. Immediately follows the continuation and development of a negative situation in the same spirit, or new troubles appear. That's how the pendulum swings. It's you who rock it yourself. Do the opposite. Either do not react in any way or inadequately. For example, you can encounter trouble with fake enthusiasm or even with idiotic delight. This is the extinguishing of the pendulum. You will make sure that there will be no continuation. As you remember, the habit of reacting negatively to unfortunate circumstances is the starting lever of the mechanism of capture of your mental energy by the pendulum. This habit will fade if you play a kind of game in which you deliberately make the following subspace: fear, confidence, despondency, enthusiasm, indignation, indifference, irritation, joy. Try to react to at least minor troubles inadequately. What are you losing? Let it be ridiculous, but this style of play will not leave the pendulum any chance. This method seems ridiculous because pendulums have taught us to play only profitable games. Try to impose your game on them now. It will give you pleasure, and you will be surprised to discover how powerful this technique is. The principle is the same here, radiating at a frequency other than the resonant one. You enter dissonance with the pendulum. It is extinguished in relation to you and leaves you alone. There is another interesting way of soft extinguishing. If someone annoys you, that is, creates a problem for you, try to determine what this person lacks, what he needs. Now imagine this man having what he lacks. It can be health, confidence, spiritual comfort. If you think about it, these are the three main things we need to feel satisfied. Think about what he really needs at the moment. Let's say the boss yelled at you. Maybe he's tired, or is he in trouble in the family? Then he needs mental comfort. Imagine him relaxing in a cozy chair by the TV, or by the fireplace, or with a fishing rod by the river, or in a bathhouse with a mug of beer. Do you know what he likes? Maybe he was pressured by higher officials and he is afraid of responsibility. Then he needs confidence. Imagine him sliding confidently on alpine skis, or on a sports car, or at a party when he is the center of attention. Maybe something hurts him. Imagine him cheerful, swimming in the sea, riding a bike, playing football. Of course, it's better to imagine what he's fond of, but you don't have to guess. Don't let it bother you. It is enough to imagine this person in a situation where he is satisfied. What's going on here? Here he appeared on your horizon with a problem for you. And it can be a robber as well. Distract yourself from the problem he brings you. Thus, you will not stick your head into the frequency capture loop from the very beginning. Imagine this man who got what he needs. What does the robber want? Eat, drink, get injected. Visualize a picture of this person's satisfaction. If you succeeded, consider that the problem is over. After all, the pendulum began to swing for a reason. Something brought him off balance. He, consciously or unconsciously, is looking for something that will return his balance, and the energy of your thoughts on a certain frequency gives him this, albeit indirectly. He will immediately replace aggression with favor. What? It's hard to believe. Check. This technique is based on the principle of pendulum cancellation. A pendulum man comes to you with a problem, and you satisfy it, but not explicitly, but on an energy level. You gave him your energy, but only the smallest part compared to what you could lose. In addition, they did a good deed, at least temporarily helped the needy. Interestingly, later he will change his attitude towards you to a more friendly one. He will have no reason why he feels comfortable in your society. Let it be your little secret. This technique can also be successfully used in cases where you yourself need to get something from a person, and he is concerned about his problems and is not willing to give it to you. Do you need an official signature? First, feed him with beneficial visualization, and he will do everything for you. Well, the last one. Where do you think the energy of the stopped pendulum goes? She goes to you. Having coped with the problem, you become stronger. Next time it's not a difficult thing for you. Isn't that right? And while struggling with the problem, you give energy to the pendulum that gave rise to this very problem. The practices of failure and pendulum cancellation are known to psychologists and psychotherapists as professional techniques. In this sense, these methods are not anything fundamentally new, but for a person who is not familiar with the methods of practical psychology, they are valuable because they provide clarity and understanding of how and why psychological protection works. Simple solutions to complex problems. Another applied value of failure, or cancellation of a pendulum, is the ability to solve all kinds of problems. It can be a difficult life situation, conflict, unfavorable circumstance, difficulty, or just a task. There are simple solutions for any complex problems. The key to the solution always lies on the surface. The only question is how to see it. The pendulum that created the problem prevents him from seeing him. The purpose of a destructive pendulum is to get energy from you. To do this, he needs to fix the frequency of radiation of your thoughts on the problem. The easiest way to do this is to convince you that the problem is complicated. If you have accepted such rules of the game, you can be safely taken by the handle and led into a tangled maze. Only then comes the understanding that the chest just opened. If a person is scared, worried, puzzled, or played on his complexes, then he will easily agree that the problem is complicated and will sit on the hook. But you cannot scare. For many problems, the prevailing opinion has already been established that they do not have simple solutions. Any person constantly faces various difficulties throughout his life, especially if it is something new, unfamiliar. As a result, everyone has a well-established habit of encountering problems with fear, and sometimes even with awe. At the same time, a person always weighs his ability to cope with difficulties on the scales of doubts. As a result, the tendency to face problems with fear turns into a puppet thread.